dictionary definition of music is the art of arranging sounds in time through the elements of melody, harmony, rhythm, and timbre. Low Pass Filter is a show about the nature of this thing we call music, how it functions in people's lives, how it's contextualized by society, and why we find certain music meaningful. This is Low Pass Filter. Hello, and welcome to Low Pass Filter. This is a show where we talk about music and what it means in our life. And today we are super fortunate to have T-Bear with us today. Welcome, T-Bear.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm really grateful.
We'll get into, all of the really interesting stuff that's happened throughout your career. But I always kind of start off with I don't know if it's a softball, but my first question is usually, what's the first music that you remember hearing?
First record I ever bought. I was having.
Let's go back before buying records. Let's
Okay.
go back for the very first thing you ever fixated on as music.
Ooh, wow. Okay, so it would be probably going out to dinner and then a nightclub with my parents at about 5 or 6 years old. I was born in New York City, but raised in the Caribbean. So they were in San Juan, Puerto Rico at the time. And it would have been at the Caribe Hilton to see the Los Chavales de España, a Cuban band.
Wow.
And that was my, I can vividly remember seeing that.
Well, that would make an impression on just about anybody, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so moving on from there, you took up the piano and talk a little bit about how that all came about. Was that your first instrument or?
No, first instrument was a couple of sticks and a can. Because I loved percussion and I loved Latin music and I loved timbales and congas and, steel drums and, calypso and all that. And then we went to Haiti because my father had worked in Haiti as well. So there was a lot of Creole kind of things. They called it rah-rah music. And there was a lot of cans and sticks and things like that. And then back to New York, and they had a piano in the house. And I remember having a go at that, and I kind of banged on it like it was a percussive instrument. And they said, "Oh, we're going to get you a lesson. You can't play it like that." So I got a lesson from the lady down the street. It turned into about 3 or 4 lessons, and then from then on it was all by ear.
Well, I have a similar story because I'm also a piano player. When I played in bands, I was a keyboard player, and I did take lessons from the lady up the street.
Okay.
And she was strictly a Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms sort of lady. And so after a while, that got old for me. But I stuck with it. So even Bach couldn't run me off of the piano. So do you have can you talk about maybe early influences? Because there's a lot of different styles of piano playing, and there's a lot of piano players.
Yeah, I think my early influences, because I used to buy a lot of vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
Every week I went down to the record store. I found the record store to be an oasis for me. And I would ride my bike down there. And I think, yeah. Give me that question one more time. Let me
who as a piano player,
Okay, as a piano player, because
right.
All right.
Do you have people that influenced you, or
I'm going to talk about all of them in a minute, but I really was influenced by the song.
Okay.
At first, and I thought that was really important because it was kind of ear candy to me, and it hooked me and it brought me in. And then as reading the liner notes, then I discovered, oh, there's different names and different people on there. And I kept seeing this one name pop up all the time, Nicky Hopkins.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he was a big influence to me. And then I kept seeing this other name, Leon Russell,
Yes.
and he popped up. And then there was this crazy ass guy in New Orleans called Dr. John, Mac
Yes.
Rabenak,
Mm-hmm.
and Alan Toussaint and Professor Longhair and Bill Payne, and all those people were big, big influence to me as a keyboard player. And because I had a lot of my roots kind of grew in the Caribbean, I had that vibe going for me, and I added it to whatever the soul vibe or the thing that was going on at the time. And playing in a rock and roll band, I played a little differently than everybody else, and acted a little differently. So it was kind of a seasoning that everybody kind of liked. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember, there was this band called Procol Harum,
Oh,
and
well.
yeah, and I thought Procol Harum and the Guess Who were my go-to bands. I mean, I'm going
Nice.
to tell you right off the bat.
And you ended up working with their producer.
Jack Richardson. Yeah,
Yes.
when they asked me who do I want to produce me, I said Jack Richardson. So that that's where I was going, and that was the river I was heading down. So it was interesting. That's a great question, and it really begs to, as you are a keyboard player, it begs to say, okay, these were the influences. The song started it, caught me, dragged me in, and then I figured out who was playing on these things.
Yeah. Well, back when you had something to look at, you had an LP and you could look down the your Nielsen record and see, oh well, here's Nicky Hopkins, and
Yeah,
really
Harry was a big, a big plus for me as well. Yeah.
absolutely. So from there, I mean, for me as a keyboard player, the difficulty was always affording anything to play on in a band.
Mm-hmm.
I always and of course it's hard to pack around a piano. So what sort of instruments did you play when you were up and coming before maybe before you even turned pro, when you were maybe in a teenager, young adult sort of situation?
Um,
Did you play
I
like
don't know if you can see this. Let me know if I can get any closer.
okay, I can have a little higher, up a little higher. Yes, okay.
There's
A,
my first keyboard.
a Vox Continental, right?
Nope,
Oh, okay.
a Farfisa Combo Compact
Ah, nice.
with a Standell amp.
Wow. Okay.
Okay,
Great
bought
stuff.
bought it Manny's Music on West 48th Street, where I ended up getting a job. Let me turn my phone off. Where I ended up getting a job.
Right.
Um, yeah, I loved Wurlitzers. I liked Rhodes for certain things. The Farfisa was a good start to instrument. Nothing beats a grand piano.
That's right.
And then there was this thing called a Hammond
Yes.
that was a piece of furniture, and you needed to have a van if you wanted to drag that thing around. And I remember a couple of guys having Hammonds, but I never wanted to pick that thing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the one thing that
What about you?
technology.
What was your first instrument?
My first keyboard instrument was actually a Casio keyboard.
Now that I think about it, my parents had, and they brought it home for Christmas. I think my father got it somehow. Was a Magnus organ.
Yes.
A
Yeah.
Magnus organ. Yeah.
I remember all those. Well, a friend of mine had an M100,
Okay.
and we hauled that around for a while. whenever his parents were out of town, we would take it to gigs and stuff, because they didn't like it to be moved. But we snuck it out of the house a few times for different gigs. So,
But I did buy a Leslie.
oh yeah,
I got a cabinet, hooked it up to the Farfisa so it would sound better.
I actually had. So folks, we're geeking out here on gear. So
go ahead.
I had the Fender.
I knew I was going to like you a lot.
The Fender version of the Leslie.
Oh, okay.
So Fender built a Leslie speaker, essentially.
Yeah.
We had one of those, and it was the guitar players, and so he was doing copying George Harrison a lot. So
sure.
But I got to play through that on recordings and stuff like that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So from there, and I'm going to condense the trip from those days with your Farfisa to Sunshine Hotel.
Okay.
Which is a song that I listened to again, researching this interview. And I realized that when I was living in London in 1979, I would go to this club called Tramps, and they would play this song all the dang time. And it was a big hit for you.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. It was top 5 in the world, and especially in England.
Yeah.
There was a guy called Kenny Tosh that broke it for me with BBC. And it started out as a rock and roll record. That's the way Jack Richardson and I looked at it, and then the disco era was on fire at that time. And I was signed to RCA, and they had some disco artists, on the label. So they had this guy that was taking their, these songs and making these 12-inch maxis out of them, and extended version, and then, breaking down the beats and things like that. And they did that with Sunshine Hotel, kind of to my chagrin, but to this day, to his credit, it's still being played in discos around the world, and they needle drop that all the time. I get royalty checks, and I get guys that want to, remix that and put it out. Just this week, I signed a contract with somebody who wanted to, re-record it, kind of rearrange it and re-release it.
Yeah. So that was one of my questions. Was this an aberration? Was this a one-off, or did you? I mean, I haven't really heard your first couple records. Were there other songs like this, or was this just the one?
That was pretty much it as far as that went, because I was signed to RCA, and I was going out and playing on a lot of people's records at the time. I was a session player, and what happened was, I was working with the Kiss conglomerate, working with Gene, working with Peter, working with their bands, and the artists that Bill Aucoin, who managed Kiss, the artists that he managed, Billy Squier, a band called Toby Bow, My Angel Baby, I played on that, and got to meet a lot of people through them. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I got signed to Premier Talent. And they were a booking agency, and they put me out in front of, 15, 20,000 people a night, opening for the Doobie Brothers, opening for Jay Giles, opening for, bands like that, big rock and roll bands. So I wasn't about to play disco songs, in those venues. It was bad enough that I got hit in the face with a tennis ball in Cobo Hall when I said good evening.
Oh no. Well, at least it wasn't.
I didn't even play a note.
At least it wasn't a beer ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Could have been worse.
But but from then on, it was rock and roll and things like that. But I was really into, before I got my record deal. I just want to backtrack a little bit. Before I got my record deal, I would go to all the open mic nights in New York City and down in the Village and around, and listen to singer-songwriters. And how I got into playing sessions and get into singer-songwriters were through two people, Odetta and
Yeah, I
Richie
saw that.
Havens. And Richie
Yeah,
Havens,
I
you
saw
know,
that. Yeah.
and I was the only vanilla fella in his band, you know, uh, and playing on his records.
Now, was that, I mean, Richie had some problems and he sort of had this mounted this comeback. Was this before or
That was right after his big record Mixed Bag one
right?
came out. I played Mixed Bag too. I did the sessions on that.
Okay.
And no, this was
Just
when I
trying to
was,
place it in
yeah,
the
this is
timeline.
when I was really young, you know,
Uh-huh.
and spending time working at Manny's Music
Hmm.
and hanging out at the Fillmore East,
Right.
where I got to jam with the Grateful Dead. I was brought
Wow.
I was brought on stage by Jerry Garcia. He beckoned me over. I came and jammed. It was a big jam night. It was the Dead, Traffic, and Hot Tuna.
Wow.
And this teenage kid on the Wurlitzer for about 15 minutes, you know. So that's when I went, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. And then I went to open mic nights everywhere, you know, and met Odetta and Richie. And then I saw a guy come in and start to sing songs, and he changed my life forever. And that man's name was John Prine.
Oh yeah.
And he was singing the stuff on his first album, Angel from Montgomery, Hello in There, Sam Stone. There's a hole in Daddy's arm where the money goes, you know.
Right.
And I was like blown away by this because my favorite songwriter at the time was Bob Dylan. And I went, here's a guy that's, I thought, as good as Bob Dylan with what he was laying down. And I want to do this. This is what, you know, this is what kind of hooked me.
Wow. Now you really have been. I was thinking of a phrase for it today, and I think it's like fame adjacent. Is that is
You know,
that a fair
yeah,
estimation?
that's really that's pretty good. You know, fame adjacent. I'm gonna use that in a
I have
song.
no pride of ownership on that.
Okay,
It's all yours. You can.
I'm gonna. You know, actually, I write my songs. I write the lyrics first. You
Uh-huh.
know, and I write a lot of short stories. You know, and then I put them to music, and because fame adjacent just struck a great note with me. I'm gonna hold on a second. I got to write that one down.
Okay. All right.
It's
I'll be looking for my royalty check on that one.
you'll get one. You know, as as an old lyric writer friend of mine who I dated for a minute, she said to me, "A word is worth a third." Fame adjacent. Oh, I love that. Hang on. Fame adjacent. You got to give the right
Just
credit to a gentleman.
just make the check out to Mateo Noche.
Mateo Noche.
I'll be able to catch that
Mateo
in a hot
Noche. I
second.
love
Yeah.
that. I love that. All right, that's in the notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's I love that, man. Fame adjacent. That's great.
But I mean, the list you mentioned, you know, Gene Simmons and Peter Criss and Billy Squier, and also, you know, Hot Tuna, and of course, Dave Mason, who in another life, when I was a recording engineer, I worked on a project with Dave Mason a very, very long time ago. And when I say worked with, I was a second engineer, so I was about as far from working with him as possible, but still being in the room. But you've got Ricky Lee Jones, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and the song that you wrote, or I don't know if you wrote the song, but you were on this on Southern Cross from the CSN record.
Yeah, I was living with Stephen Stills, and the song sort of came in as a song called Seven League Boots that a
Okay.
few guys had written, and then he grabbed it and you know, stamped Stephen Stills all over it. And I was with him at the time, you know, and I remember in a very hazy, fuzzy, drunken kind of, you know, coked up evening, because that's what we did in those days.
I
Uh,
remember.
yeah. I remember working on that, and then I was also at the same time, because of Gene Simmons, working with Cher, and
Right.
because he was dating Cher, and
Yes.
so I was in LA at the time, and Steven had me come over, and we had a big old kind of party at his house, and he played me some things, and one of them was Seven League Boots, and I went, oh, this one's great. And he says, yeah, I love nautical songs. I love to sail. And we got into this whole thing because I grew up in the Caribbean. So, um, yeah. And I went in the studio with them over at Crossroads of the World. That was Graham Nash's studio in LA.
Mhm.
And did some stuff there with them. And then we went over to a studio in North Hollywood, and we laid the tracks down for Southern Cross there. And I played on that. Yeah, it was a great song, and I was glad to help and throw a little arranging in it. You know,
And then I also saw Giorgio Moroder. And
yeah, yeah, because I was signed to a German label called Telefunken,
mhm.
Teldec,
Yep.
and the gentleman that signed me was a guy called Thomas Stein, and
Okay.
he ended up being a very big, powerful record executive at BMG for 10 years. But he and I had a wonderful relationship, and he hooked me up with the Giorgio Moroder people because he wanted me to sing a song that might get into the Eurovision,
I
thing
see.
that they were doing.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
went looking for an example of your collaboration. I couldn't come up with one, but
Yeah,
uh,
there's a couple out there. I'm glad you didn't find it.
so you made two or three records, or was there the two studio and a live record before you went on your
There were
hiatus?
four RCA albums.
Okay,
Um, there were two studios, one live, and a best of
right.
with
And
some.
those were with Jack Richardson producing.
Those were with Jack, yeah,
Uh-huh.
and
Nimbus 9. Why do I know that had something to do with him? That was his
oh,
product
that was a
production.
studio in Toronto that Bob
Okay.
Ezrin,
Right.
right,
Yes, yes.
and,
Okay.
and he
The
ran.
guess who recorded there, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah, yeah.
quite a bit.
Alice Cooper recorded there, a bunch of people. Yeah.
Right.
Great
Yeah.
studio in Toronto, in Yorkville.
Yeah. So you got Bear, that was your first record, right?
Red Hot and Blue is the first. Then at
Okay.
Sunshine Hotel, then Bear,
Captured
um,
Alive.
Captured Alive, and Best of, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So
And then I took a hiatus.
yes, you took a left turn into civilian life, or I don't know if we
Yeah,
want to call it that,
I,
but
I, I was in civilian life for 25 years almost.
uh-huh.
Um, I had gotten married, and my wife was pregnant with our first kid, and we had three. And she said, "No more touring for you, no more running around. You need a day job."
You had to get legit.
Yeah,
That's what I like to call it.
yeah.
So I kind of did the same thing. So anyway,
So I got legit, and I worked for a company out in San Fernando Valley in Chatsworth,
okay.
selling light bulbs.
All right.
That's what I did. So one week, this is the God's honest truth. One week, I was in A&M Studios doing sessions, like on a Friday or Saturday, and on Tuesday, I was back there with their sales manager, who wanted to show me how to sell light bulbs.
Wow.
And that was one of their accounts. And talk about humility. I walked in there, and the receptionist goes, "Hey, Bear, are you in here today?" And I said, "No, I'm kind of with this guy." "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're selling light bulbs." She goes, "You're selling light bulbs?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing." And I didn't realize that you could do both.
Right. Right.
It was an ego crushing thing, because at the time I had a big puss on, and I was not happy about not having I wasn't going to play music again, but my wife was adamant, and that was that. And so I worked for that company for 5 years, and then I opened my own company called oddly enough, bare lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And it still exists to this day. And I went and had a day job, and then unfortunately fortunately got divorced, and met a woman, and 2 years later married her, a woman called Nina. And she said to me, she says, "I know who you are. I have a lot of records that you played on. And by the way, my ex," I said, "Yeah, played guitar in your band 25 years ago."
Wow.
And I went, "Wow, it's a small world."
It
And she
sure
said,
is.
"Yeah, and it's time for you to put a band back together and do what you really should be doing."
So
So,
let me just jump back though to we'll come up to
okay.
the present here, but uh let me just jump back to you leaving the music business. I mean, was it really that just cleaved sort of thing?
It was
And
a cleaver.
yeah, you
It was
didn't
like
play, you didn't write.
Friday, I did a session with Neil Girardo and Pat Benatar, Pat's
Mhm,
guy
mhm.
at A&M. And Monday, I went to work for Liberty Lighting.
And then for the next
Fi-
35 years or
Yeah, yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Uh
The only thing I did, the only thing I did is the occasional session would pop up and I'd have to do it because look, I'm getting paid. I'm going to do this, and
right.
I would do it. But the other thing that I did was I got clean and sober.
Right.
And that was a big part of this whole thing. Being a worker amongst workers, and showing up and doing your gig and staying clean, and being a daddy and being a husband, and also giving back to the musical community. So we started a thing called the Musicians Picnic. And every summer we'd have a live picnic with a big stage and very well-known artists, and raise money for a thing that I helped put together with some other guys, called MAP, the Musicians Assistance Program. Okay, Buddy Arnold. And MAP is now Music Cares. It's
Right.
morphed into Music Cares. So what we would do is we'd raise money and put musicians that had no insurance into detox and rehabs and halfway
Mhm.
houses. And that's what I did. And to this day, I do the same thing.
Well,
I
I'm
still
sure
do the same thing.
I'm sure I don't have to tell you that, I'm sure it's obvious that that probably saved your life.
Oh, I know it saved my life because
Uh,
I lost a lot of friends along the way. I can tell you, 50 to 60 people that didn't make it
yeah.
because they couldn't get clean or sober. And, we missed a lot of great music, you know. But I help a lot of people today. I'm 41 years sober and clean.
Wow.
And
Congratulations for that.
thank you. And, and I love giving back to my community. That's what it's about, pay
Hmm.
it forward, give it back. Can't keep what you have unless you give it away.
Yeah. Well, good for you. So here we are now, in the last, guess it'd be like 7 years. Was it 2017 that you did your comeback record? Is that
Yeah, my comeback record is called Fresh Bear,
Fresh Bear Tracks?
right there on your screen, I think.
Yes, it is. A little higher, a little higher. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened was, I was doing a session over at Robbie Krieger's studio, Horse Latitudes.
Hmm.
And Robbie came in and saw me, and he says, "Hey, Bear, what's going on?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing a session here today." He says, "What's going on with you?" I said, "Well, I just started writing songs again, and, I'm thinking about jumping back into the pool." He says, "Well, come here, come use my studio." I said, "Robbie, I'm not signed to a label. I don't have deep pockets. And, frankly, he said, "No, no, no, no. I want you to make a record here." I said, "I'd love to make a record here. But like I said," he said, "Forget that. When the studio is not being in use, you come in and you just pay the engineer. How's that?" And I went,
Wow.
what it, that's so generous and amazing. And,
Did Robbie come and play on your record?
Well, he said that was the caveat. He had to play, he had to play on the record.
Okay, all right.
So Stephen Stills, Robbie Krieger, Edgar Winter, um, Tom Scott, all the
Wow.
cats, Dean Parks, uh, Bent Montench from the Heartbreakers, everybody, the East Street Horn guys, La Bamba and all them, they all came. Lenny Castro, Chuck Berghofer from the Wrecking Crew on his upright, everybody came, everybody showed up, everybody gave, and Fresh Bear Tracks. And the last song on it is called Nina's Song. And
Yes.
the album's dedicated to her because just as we were finishing the album, she was diagnosed stage 4 cancer. She passed away. And that album wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be here talking with you today if it wasn't for her nagging and insisting that I make a record again. And before she left this world, she wrote me out kind of a menu. And it says, finish the record, never cancel another gig, go out on tour, live your best life, and fall in love again. So,
it's amazing that these two very different gifts were given to you by your wives.
yeah,
one saved your life and one gave you a life back, I guess,
absolutely,
in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And oddly enough, the last song on that record is called Nina's Song. That was the first song that I wrote when we were dating. And she would sit on the other side of the piano at her desk because she went back to UCLA to get her degree as an adult. And I was playing this song and she goes, "Oh, that's a good hook. Use that," And then Ed Cherney. Do you know Ed Cherney, the mixer at all?
I just know the name. I don't
Ed
know.
Cherney, the guy that produced that record was Tony Bronigal.
Okay.
And Tony Bronigal was out on the links with Ed Cherney that around that time. And Ed said, what are you doing, Tony? And Tony says, "Oh, I just finished this comeback record by Richard T. Bear." He said, "Richard T. Bear? I haven't heard that name in like decades." And he says, "Yeah, we just finished this album." And Ed said, "Whoa, I want to mix it." Because he's the mixer in LA. He's the guy, he did Nick of Time. He did, 100 things,
Right. Yeah.
That, come on. The guy, 10 of the best records you ever heard, he mixed. And he said, "Oh, I want to make," Tony says, "We can't afford you." He's doing it out of his own pocket. And Ed said, "You don't realize this, but when I was the second tape operator and getting into the business, Richard was doing his demos that got him a record deal at RCA. And he was so generous and so nice to me that once when we all sent out for sandwiches and mine didn't come, they forgot mine, he gave me his sandwich. And I never forgot that.
Wow.
And I'm going to do that record. And if for change in his pocket, I don't care. I'm going to mix his album. So we gave him the hard drive and said, "We want these 12." And there was 17 on the hard drive. "We want these 12." And he mixed all 17 and gave them back. And he passed away about 2 months later. We didn't realize it, but he wanted there to be a full circle in his life. So, that's Fresh Bear Tracks is quite a testament to a lot of stuff that's gone on. And that was put out during COVID. And even though it got great reviews and had a #1 record that Stephen Stills and I wrote called "Give It Up," Stephen Stills plays on it, Walter Trout plays on it. It went to #1 in Europe. The album, really didn't take off because COVID was happening and there was no one to, we couldn't promote it. We couldn't go out. We couldn't do anything. So the record company, the guys that signed me, Bruce Quarto at Porto Valley Records, he said, "I want you to make another one." So we made, ta-da, "The Way of the World."
Right. Yeah.
And
Well, let's talk about that. But I had a couple of questions for you
Sure.
before we get to that, and I want to finish up with your new record. So you've got a band, Route
Yeah.
66. Tell me a little bit about the band. What would people
Well,
expect
what
to
I did
see?
was before I got the record deal, I had this band because Nina was nagging me to go out live, play live
Mhm.
downtown. So I called up a couple of old friends of mine, Denny Sywell and Lawrence Juber. Denny was the founding member of Wings, and Lawrence played guitar. So Denny was the first guy to enter Wings, and Lawrence Juber was the last guy that Paul hired to play in Wings. So it was
Mhm.
kind of an interesting thing. And then I got John Woodhead, who played guitar in Leon Russell's band. And then
Wow.
I got Mark Pender and Richie LaBamba Rosenberg from the E Street Band, and then Joe Sublette on sax. So I had the E Street section on horns,
Nice.
um, and a couple of great bass players, and we played. It was about 10 of us in the band, and what it was a modern day version of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. That's
Okay.
exactly what it was. And we played out in the San Fernando Valley in Woodland Hills every Tuesday night at a little club called the Write-Off Room.
All right.
And there was a line down the street. You couldn't get into the place. It was like
I'll bet.
it was a smoking hot band. And people from the record industry that appreciated old people used to come in, and there was a great buzz going on. And Bruce Quarto came in, and he was like totally, shock and awe. He was sitting there, and he videoed us and this and that, and he offered me a record deal, and so that's how I got the record deal. And then
Nice.
the new band, the new version of that is Tony Bronigal on drums, and Lawrence Juber on guitar, and Ricky Cortez on bass. Ricky Cortez comes out of John Mayall's band, and Lawrence Juber, of course, Wings, and Tony Bronigal, Bonnie Raitt, Little Feat, Robert Cray, Taj Mahal, Ricky
Mhm.
Lee Jones, drums, and I'm on keyboard. So we got this quartet, and it's just T-Bear, and
Oh, so okay,
it's
this
a
is the
great band.
formation that will be touring, and are you touring?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what?
yeah. We're playing gigs here on the West Coast right now,
Okay.
and then I'm also out with Walter Trout playing keyboards with him right now.
Nice.
And I've been there over the last year. I've been to Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe, Great Britain, and all over the United States with him. That's been a lot of fun because I love playing the blues.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hey, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was Bare Facts.
Yeah, Bare Facts is a podcast I did after the release of Fresh Beer Tracks, and everybody kind of showed up, like everybody that played on that album showed up to do the Bare Facts with me. And it's just me hanging with my musician friends. Like it would be a conversation like we're having right now.
Mhm.
And it was every Wednesday, and Stills, who doesn't give interviews, would come on the show,
Wow.
and people like that, and a lot of people you'd never expect to see. Let's see, who else? Edgar Winter did about all kinds of strange people, were on the show. Chuck Lorre, the film, the TV producer.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
The
he
Big
he
Bang
was
Theory. Yeah.
yeah, Big Bang, all that stuff.
Yeah.
He'd come on the show and tell me about how he started in the business playing guitar in a show band in Las Vegas and writing the Ninja Turtle theme.
Wow. Okay. I did not know that.
No,
Boy,
I didn't know that either,
wow. Okay, that's
So
an
that
interesting
was the
fact.
Bare Facts. But every Tuesday, Bare Facts is kind of put on the back burner for right now. But every Tuesday, there's Live at the Bear Cave, and
Okay.
that's on Facebook. Facebook Live every Tuesday, LA time, 1 to 1:30, and it's me at the keyboard singing and playing like 2 or 3 songs, and talking about the events of the day and conversing with the people that come on the show from all around the world.
How fun is that?
Oh, it's so much fun. And this day in history, we do that.
Uh-huh.
And then I also quote Keith Richards' books, some of his phrases and some of the things, as well as Yogi Berra, quotes some of his quotes. When you come to the fork in the road, take it,
And it's deja vu all over again.
Totally.
So one more question before we get to your new album is that, have you crossed paths with the Swedish T-Bear?
No, I never have.
Okay. You know about him though, right?
I've heard rumblings.
Okay.
But I've never crossed paths with that cat. The only guy I wanted to meet at one time was called Edward Bear.
Okay.
Who was a Canadian.
All right. I don't know who that is, but
and then there's up in Lake Arrowhead and Big Bear. There's a black bear that comes and raids everybody's house when they're not in the house. He makes sure that he sees the car leave, and then he comes around. And that's my cousin Reggie.
Okay. Well, let's jump over to your the new record. Why don't you tell me a little bit about, and tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about what the new record's all about.
Okay, the record is called The Way of the World, and it started out the week that I would listen to nothing but Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks, all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And the times they are changing. And it was the tail end of COVID. So we're still not out of the woods yet, but I started writing some short stories. I wrote a short story called Walter Mitty's Glasses.
Right. Yeah. Which ends up as a song on this record.
Yeah,
right?
which is a short story. Yeah. And I'm writing all these short
You're a Thurber fan, I guess.
Amongst, I'm a fan of yours now. I got to tell you that. Yeah, and after listening to Bob Dylan for the week, I went, if I was going to write a song, I started writing these phrases down, and it was because, like I said, I write lyrics first. What would Bob say about a time like this in this world? So that's how The Way of the World came about. Every song on this record, on this new record, is an homage to someone or something. We can go piece it, go one by one, and I can tell you, and you'll go, oh man, I never thought of that. And because that's the way I wrote it. Now, how am I going to record it? I didn't really want to go into the studio and do a big production thing like Fresh Bear Tracks. We recorded 23 songs, 23 tracks on Fresh Bear Tracks, 21 originals. So, we still have stuff on the shelf. And I wanted to do something kind of more minimalist and more retro. So I called up Tony and Lawrence, and I said, we should just do this, just us guys, put everything down like that and take all the frosting off the cake and just, get down to what's really there in the roux, And I thought it was a good idea, and I would write a song like The Way of the World, and I'd go over to Lawrence Juber's house with the keyboard. I'd sit down, put a click track on it or not a click track. Mostly, we'd start with a click track, and I'd sing like a pilot vocal, put it down. We'd send the track over to Tony Bronicle's house. He had his drums set up in his living room, and he'd record the track, drum tracks right on there because we had the click track going and this and that. And then he would send it back to Lawrence. Lawrence put the guitars on it. Then we'd send it over to Ricky or Hutch Hutchinson from Bonnie Raitt's band, and the bass would go on it. Then we'd send it over to Lenny Castro. He'd put the percussion on it. And then I'd say, who's got the best mic in town? And I'd go to their house. I'd sing over J.J. Blair's.
So what is the best mic in town? That's what I'd like to know.
I'm kind of
U87.
Yeah, I'm Neumann. I'm a Neumann guy.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, I'm a Neumann guy. Yeah,
Okay,
I was about to go the U way. Yeah, that's good. And there's a Shore that I like too. So but yeah, you hit my number one favorite. I go over to the best mic locker in town that privately owned is J.J. Blair's over at
okay,
Force Fox 5 over in Hollywood at
wow.
his house. He's got a mic locker that I've only seen once before at Capitol Records, over at Capitol Studios. But
I, if you have a minute after we're done, I'll tell you about the best mic locker I ever worked with.
okay.
But one thing I did want to say about this record is I'm surprised to hear it was put together this way because it is so well recorded. It really is. In listening to it, I was just blown away by how great everything sounds. So maybe it's that U87 magic on
It's
a
it's
lot of things, but
it's that, and it's a undiscovered. Well, I don't even want to give him that many prompts because I don't want to, lose working with him all the time.
yeah.
But Lawrence Juber, is the cat, and him and Tony and myself, throwing my opinions in. But it's the retro that I wanted, and sonically it sounds so good. When we had JJ, because Ed Cherney, we lost, but when I went to get it mixed, JJ Blair was the guy, and he works with Joe Bonamassa and Rod Stewart and Smokey Robinson, and he's a really, really great engineer and a great musician himself. Um, he heard it. In fact, we cut let's see, Breathe and Jewel live at his house because he had a big grand piano. And this sonically everything sounded so good. And he went, you know what? I have so little to do on this record. A lot of people have to, when they're mixing things, they got to fix this, do that. But it wasn't the case. It was what you hear is how it was recorded. It wasn't fixed or repaired.
Yeah.
This is why that's why it sounds that good to you.
Yeah, I really love the sound of this record. So why don't we tell people how they can get a hold of this record? Where can they find it?
Yeah, you can get this record over at quartovalley.com.
Okay.
You can download it at Apple, Amazon, all the streaming platforms. But what I will tell your listeners is, I don't make records to have one shiny thing on it, and the rest are also rans. I can tell you that there's probably a half a dozen songs on here that you will be caught up with. And
Well, I can attest to that because I really enjoyed the record.
and if we still have a little bit more time,
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about. Oh, let's talk about Walter Mitty's glasses. We brought that up before.
Please.
An example of how I write. I wrote a short story called Walter Mitty's Glasses. It's all about a guy that walks into an antique store barn, one of those marts that everybody has a kiosk in.
Mhm.
He walks up to one of the kiosks, and I'm just, dumbing it down really quickly. But he walks up to the kiosk and he looks around, and he goes to the next one, and he sees one, and it's got nothing but eyeglasses. And he's like, okay, let me try these. And he picks one up and he puts it on and looks in the mirror. Nah, not me. And he grabs another one, he puts it on. Nah. And he grabs a third one, and puts it on, and there's somebody else looking back at him. It is not him. Some other person, handsome, tanned, perfect hair, got a little suit on. He's looking sharp and happening. And he takes them off, and it's him. He puts them back on. It's that guy again. And he says to the owner of the barn, he says, well, where did you get these glasses? Oh, some guy comes in with a box once a month. We put them out. He said, no, where did this glass come from? These eyeglasses. He says, I don't know. So the guy looks at the side, and he's looking at the thing up here on the and it says property of Walter Mitty. Now, for your listeners that don't know who Walter Mitty is, it was a Danny Kaye movie in the 60s. Ben Stiller remade it with Kristen Wiig and Sean Penn about 10 years ago. And it's all about a guy that daydreams himself into being a hero or being.
We should mention that first it was a short story by James Thurber.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Go
So
ahead.
Starts out as a short story, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the song is all about a guy that goes to a party, puts on those glasses, and he sees the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, and he knows she's going home with him because that's what he thinks he looks like. So that's how I write. Jewel, for example. Okay, here's an interesting take on Jewel. Not the singer Jewel. Has nothing to do with the singer Jewel. I went out on a date, and when I was kind of writing this stuff, and I went out with a girl called Julie. And Julie is the personal assistant of Lou Adler.
Okay.
Okay, now
high-powered person.
Yeah, Lou Adler was the producer of Tapestry with Carole King.
Yes.
He was the producer of the Mamas and Papas, California Dreamin', all that stuff. He was the producer of Cheech and Chong's movies.
Right.
He had a stake in A&M Records. Okay. He owns the Roxy in LA. He sits at the Laker
game. Big guy. He's a big guy.
Right. He sits at the Laker game on the floor next to the Lakers bench, next to Jack Nicholson. He's that guy.
Right.
So Julie's been working for him for 39 years as his assistant. When she was a teenager, she started working for him. She's been there ever since. So I said, Julie, and I'm trying to make, a great impression of myself. So I said, Julie, yeah, have you got any nicknames? And she says, oh yeah, I just got one last week, and it's Jewel. I'm now being referred to as Jewel. And I said, how did you get that? And she says, well, Lou couldn't use some tickets to the Laker game, and he had me drive over to Jack Nicholson's house, which took me 3 hours in traffic. And I get over there because, Jack could use Lou's tickets to bring somebody else to sit with him at the game. And he opens the door, and he realized I've been in traffic for 3 hours, and he says, Julie, from now on, you're a Jewel, and nobody's going to ever use another name for you except Jewel. So I said to her, he said, so Julie, I'm going to write you a song. And she looked at me straight in the eye, and she said, you wouldn't be the first.
Oh, interesting. All right.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, who wrote you a song? And she goes, J.D. Souther.
Wow. Okay.
She goes, yeah, when I was dating him, he wrote me a song. And I was like, and for your listeners, J.D. Souther, Eagles, writes for the Eagles, Jackson Browne, all those people. He writes all those songs.
I can't
great,
tell you
great
why.
songwriter.
His solo hit, I Can't Tell You Why. Is that the one? Was that J.D. Souther? No. That wasn't him. Yep. That was the other guy in the Eagles.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But J.D. Souther, nonetheless. So I said to her, I said, I called her a day or two later, and I said, it's great having dinner with you, and I've started writing a song. And I said, the only difference is between me and J.D. Souther is you're going to know it's about you from the first line on. And and the first line of the song, are you a diamond or a precious gem? You got your nickname, Jewel, from your famous friend.
Wow.
So it lays it right out there.
Yeah. Great song, too.
Yeah. That's kind of how I write.
All right. Well, T-Bear, this has been just a fabulous time spending with you. And I expect everyone to get out there and get a copy of this record and buy several and hand them out to people on the street. Yeah,
tbear.rocks.com. is my website.
Okay. And
I'm out there with Walter Trout.
Your socials, like your
Yeah.
Facebook page.
Facebook page is is
T-Bear at
on Facebook.
Facebook.com.
Yeah. And yeah, come on and all you folks come on the live at the Bear Cave on Tuesdays and say hi. There's people from around the world, from Australia to Europe to Canada to United States. Everybody comes on. We have a lot of fun. I'll be out touring with Walter Trout soon. I'm also out playing with my band, the T-Bear Band. We're going to have a gig in LA at the Mint.
Okay.
Yeah, that's coming up, and that's Saturday this month in 2 weeks. I think it's the 22nd. And,
okay, sounds about right. Yep.
And then at the Write-Off Room, the new Write-Off Room, I'll be back there in Studio City, July 23rd, which is a Friday night. I'll be playing there.
Well, hopefully
with Walter for a month or two, and then back. I'm going to World Records actually on September 20th. I'm going to.
If you play in Portland, you could stop off in Humboldt County. Just
That's
saying.
true.
Just putting a little suggestion in your mind there.
Because when I
think
leave,
you'd go over really well up here.
When I leave, we'll talk about that. When we say goodbye and we're off the recording thing, I'll give you my deets and we'll talk about that, because I want to know you in the future. I want you to be my friend.
Well, thank you so much for that. Well, that's about all the time we have for this installment of Low Pass Filter. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you again next time on Low Pass Filter.
And remember, cats and kittens, if you can't help them, don't hurt them.